We are back, and it's going down in the desert. This Saturday, UFC Fight Night, the first fight night in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, takes place between Whittaker and Aliskerov. I'm going to be going through every fight on the card, giving my detailed picks and predictions, but first off, I reluctantly have to recap the fight card last weekend, which was a bit of a shit card. In my defense, that could have been a Bellator, PFL type card. A lot of the fights on there. There was a couple good ones, but a lot of them were absolute shit. Anyway, I went 4-7, which is not great. That brings the total of the year to 14-9. We're looking to drastically improve here. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So first fight of the night is Long Zhao versus Chang Ho Lee. Now, I've seen a lot of people this week very excited about Chang Ho Lee, and I understand why. If you look at his road to the UFC, and by the way, this is the finals of the road to UFC, which is essentially Asia's version of like a Dana White's Contender Series, but it's in a tournament format, which is kind of fun and nostalgic. They like tournaments in the Middle East and in Asia in general. But so Chang Ho Lee has had 2 ground and pound stoppage wins, and if the only sample size that you have is watching the let's put it this way: if the only sample size that you have is looking at the results of the road to UFC matchups, you would say, Long Zhao's winning decisions. Chang Ho Lee is getting ground and pound finishes. I like Chang Ho Lee's chances here, right? Well, if you actually watch the fights, Chang Ho Lee, to me, seems like the kind of guy who is very reliant on being able to get a takedown and implement his top game. And I'm not really sure what he's going to be able to bring on the feet. Whereas a guy like Long Zhao is very well-rounded and has a lot of experience. He's got more than 3 times as many fights going into this, and he's the younger guy here at 26 years of age, fighting the 30-year-old Chang Ho Lee. I think that Long Zhao he might get taken down, but I think that he's ultimately going to be able to work his way back up to the feet, and I think that on the feet, look, what he did in his most recent outing versus Shuya Kamikubo was insane. I'm pretty sure he landed 60 significant strikes in the 3rd round alone. His gas tank is gnarly, and I see him winning a decision by out-voluming Chang Ho Lee. Now, moving forward in the card, we have Magomed Gaziasulov versus Brenson Ribeiro. I think that Magomed, from the outside in, looking at his shiny 8-0 record, the fact that he is fighting out of Dagestan, Russia, which is a place that we've become very familiar with as UFC fans over the last 4 years. He's checking all the boxes, and you hear someone's coming out of Dagestan, right? So you think to yourself, this guy must have this suffocating grappling style, but he's actually a kickboxer by trade. Now, his grappling is good, but he's mostly getting it done with the hands. I am not going to go back and watch fights on the regional scene against, 0-0, 0-2, 1-2, 0-3, 0-0 guys. But I did watch his fight against Jose Medina, and I have to say, he reminds me a lot of Javid Basharat, where it's he's very good, but he maybe that fight was an off night for him. But I just didn't like that he was letting Jose stay in there, and he wasn't pulling away enough, even though I felt as though he was a much better fighter than Jose. Brenson Ribeiro, on the other hand, we don't have a lot to go off of. We have a very impressive Contender Series match. And I say when we don't have a lot to go off of, it's like, can I go back and watch his fights on the regional scene? Yes. But the thing is there's certain organizations on the regional scene where I'm going to, like Cage Warriors, LFA, where I'm going to give a little bit more weight to the victories that I see. And like Shudo Brazil, like that's legit. But some of these, Revelation and Hombres de Honor, I don't... sometimes you can watch those and you can actually come out of it having a worse take on the fighter because they're just destroying somebody on the regional scene who isn't anywhere near the skill level that these guys are going to be at in the UFC. The thing that you really have to look at here, though, is that he's got a tremendous reach. He's got a 5.5-inch reach advantage, which, is something to think about. But as much as I was just saying that it kind of scares me that Magomed will stay too close in the fight, I believe that Brenson Ribeiro is not the guy who's going to defeat him. I think that Magomed is going to win a unanimous decision where, kind of like what I said, you're going to be sitting there thinking to yourself, like, this guy's really good, he should be finishing him, or he should be, like, really pulling away, and he's doing enough to win, but it's still closer than you'd like to see. And at light heavy, I think that he's going to struggle when he gets up there to some of the upper echelon guys. I think that we're going to see a matchup not too far away. Like, this is maybe not the greatest comp, but I'm just thinking on my feet here. Like, if he gets paired up with like a Dustin Jacoby and the line is, minus 400 for Magomed, like, I might be worried in that one that he's just not going to do enough. Again, maybe that's not the greatest example, but anyway, Magomed Gadzi Yasulov by unanimous decision. Moving on here, we have Muin Gafarov versus Kyung Ho Kang. I was really tempted to take Kyung Ho Kang here because Muin's first 2 fights in the UFC, right? Like, the first fight against, Sexy Mexi, against John Castaneda, like, he just displayed low IQ, if I'm being honest. He does get dropped in the first, which, definitely swung the bout toward Castaneda, but it's like he's growing in the second, and I think he gets annoyed that there was like a clash of heads that didn't get called, but you can't just come charging in and headbutt your opponent, which is what he did. And then he ends up losing a point that round. And then it was like he was looking good in the third as well, but he ultimately ends up losing because he lost a point. And then, they match him up with Saeed, and I think that, like, not trying to go against what I'm saying here, but it's like Saeed is very legit. And I remember the line, I think, was like weirdly close on that one. I think Saeed was only like a minus 200 favorite or something like that, or minus high 100s. And I saw that one as a walk in the park for Saeed. But here, I think that this is the type of opponent that, like Kyung Ho Kang, that he should have gotten. I don't know why they gave him Saeed. I guess it's just because this was a fight in the Middle East and that they wanted to feature some Middle Eastern guys. But I don't know if they necessarily were doing Muin any favors. So I like this matchup more. And, it's funny because when 2 guys have a common opponent in that they both lost to, Sexy Mexi, John Castaneda, within their last 2 fights, I guess all you can really do is watch that fight and kind of say, oh, how did the 2 of them fare? And it's like weird because Kyung Ho Kang had like, he still lost a unanimous decision. He kind of, like, in a way, he looked better, but he had less of a chance to win. And I think that, Kyung Ho Kang, first of all, he's 36. And he's not one of these 36-year-old guys who has sustained lots of damage. There was a 4-year mandatory military service that he did for South Korea, which, basically put him on the bench from 26 to 30. So he missed some of his prime years. But what I saw in his fight versus John Castaneda is that he just doesn't let it go enough, and that he can be taken down. So, I don't see him being able to implement, a grappling offense on Muin. I think that he's very defensively sound, which speaks to the fact that, Kyung Ho Kang has only been finished by knockout and submission one time in his pretty long career. I mean, if you count the no contest, he's had 30 fights, and he's only been finished twice, which, is impressive. He's losing the majority of his fights by decision. And sometimes people will juxtapose the way that somebody normally loses against the way that the other guy normally wins. But you also have to understand that when you see a guy like Muin who has only one decision win and he's mostly finishing his opponents, you have to look at who is he fighting. And I will say that the only thing that scares me about this pick is, Muin losing to Chad and Helliger in a split decision on Dana White's Contender Series is, a little bit suspect, especially considering that he was a big favorite, and that, he should have been able to get that done. I'm willing to look past it, and I'm willing to say that, from what I've seen from him in his last few outings, as long as he doesn't commit some crazy foul, you would really like to believe that coming off 2 losses, that his coaches are talking to him about, listen, you got to be smart here. We need to win this fight. You can't get cut from the UFC. So, be aggressive, but do not commit any fouls, and just win this fight. And I think that he's going to. So I've got Muin Gafarov to win this fight by decision. So moving forward in the card, we have Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Nicholas Dalby. Now, Nicholas Dalby has been on a very impressive run, and you would think to yourself, okay, Nicholas Dalby has won 4 consecutive fights. And everyone, MMA is very much a what have you done for me lately type of a sport. It's strange. It's a what have you done for me lately type of a sport unless you're a legend. And then it's a I'll always hold on to the past type of a sport. But obviously he's not a legend. He's just a guy who's been hovering outside of the top 15, who possesses great skill. But in this matchup, I think it's going to be tricky for him because I don't rate Claudio Silva as being a fantastic fighter. Neither do I Warley Alves. The Muslim Salikov win was impressive, but Muslim has shown a susceptibility to losing a fight down the stretch if he's not able to get the TKO. With his kung fu style. And Gabriel Bonfim, you have to understand that fighters are allowed to make mistakes and then get better as they get older, and he's only 26. And my guess is you're fighting in, your home country of Brazil. There's a lot of pressure on you to finish this guy, and he just got so caught up with the finish that he just gassed himself out. And, a vet like Nicholas Dalby sensed that and went in for the kill and got it. But, you think back on that fight and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, Nicholas Dalby destroyed him. But he didn't destroy him. He only really started to have success in that fight, toward the end of the second round when Bonfim was just completely gassed. And now we got to talk about Rinat Fakhretdinov. I know that he's coming off of a draw, which, like, there's a lot of mistakes that he made in that fight. One, I don't like how and I really hope that his coaches have helped him to understand this. I understand the sense of gamesmanship, but I don't like how, he's laughing and talking to his opponent and being playful and dapping him up and hugging him. Like, it's just not a good look. Especially considering what ended up happening to him. Like, if you are just beating down on someone and you're trying to show a little mercy, it's one thing. But, like, Zaleski dos Santos was in that fight. I mean, he was losing, but, like, he wasn't just completely decimated. And then he lands a very solid teep kick to the body, which drops Fakhretdinov and ends up being a 10-8 round. Luckily for him, the ref let him, fight to the end and fight to the draw rather than take a TKO, which it could have been. I mean, if that was Mark Goddard, that probably would have been called as soon as he, dropped and turtled and was taking shots. So, good on the ref for letting him, ride that out. But let's talk about the positives of that fight. I don't think that Dos Santos is an easy guy to take down, and Hanat made it look pretty easy, and he's very solid at staying heavy on top and not rushing through his progressions, which is important if you're fighting a guy like Dalby, who is he's going to fight to get back up to the feet, and you have to hold him there, and you can't bank on Dalby getting tired. You have to beat Dalby. But I think that Hanat will beat Dalby. I think that, he looks solid on the feet. I mean, he doesn't seem to possess the heaviest of hands, but he lands good shots. And, with his well-roundedness, I see him understanding his position in the division right now, being that he's on the outskirts of the top 15, and understanding that this is a showcase, for him in the Middle East, and that this is an opportunity for him to make the most of it and to win this fight. And I just see Dalby as being too tough to get finished by like a TKO sequence. I think he's going to move around. And I think that Fakhretdinov is going to come out of this with a decision win. Dalby is a live dog, but like I just think that sometimes it's more so like I'm going to just give a quick example, right? Someone like Tony Ferguson, 7-fight losing streak, but he's fighting absolute killers. And if you let Tony have some fights with some of these guys in like the, 40 to 20 range of the lightweight rankings, like he would get wins. And so it's like people will put weight on these win streaks, but who are they beating? And other than that last fight, I don't think that Dalby has beat anyone that leads me to believe that he's going to be able to defeat Fakhretdinov. And it's like, what are we banking on here? Are we banking on Renat getting tired? I don't see that happening. He didn't get tired in his fight against Dos Santos. He got hit with a body shot that dropped him. And so I think that will be a wake-up call for Fakhretdinov, and that he's going to fight intelligently and get the dub. So anyway, moving on, we have Muhammad Naimov versus Felipe Lima. Now, this is a very interesting fight. Naimov was originally scheduled to fight Melsik Bagdasaryan, which I would have favored Naimov in that fight as well. But now he's going up against a bantamweight in Felipe Lima. Now, I'm just guessing that when Melsik drops out, they are just scrambling to get somebody who's willing to take this fight. And like they have to go outside of the roster to find someone here, which I think speaks to the fact that having to fight Naimov in the Middle East on short notice is a tall order, and balls on the guy for Felipe Lima taking this. And I understand Felipe Lima is he's on a 12-fight winning streak. And, you can't really rate his opponents, like, early on because, like, even just a few fights ago, he was fighting Fernando Flores, who's 8-7, I do understand that the level of competition, it started to increase with his last few bouts, but I really don't know if there's anything that I could gain from going back and watching those fights. But I did go back and watch the Magard fight and the Magard. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Magard, I think it is. But anyway, he had to implement his grappling to end up getting the W there. And like, if there's anything that I learned from Lima, it's that he's very twitchy, very good, very technically sound, but he didn't even look big as a bantamweight, at least from what I'm used to seeing in the UFC. Like, he is a bantamweight, but I'm saying, like, he didn't look like a, oh my gosh, how is this guy making bantamweight kind of a frame. And he's fighting up at feather. And so I'm just not sure here. Like, I see that the odds are basically at a pick'em, which I think is really interesting because, like, I don't see how Lima is going to be able to out-grapple Naimov. I think that Naimov might be using PEDs. When you just look at his frame and you look at how strong he looks, I mean, he's a huge featherweight. I think he'd be a decent-sized lightweight. And I think that we've seen with other fights, Benoit Saint-Denis versus the guy I was just talking about, Elihu Dos Santos or Zaleski Dos Santos. It's like, we've seen what BSD has gone on to do, and yet he really struggled with a guy outside of the rankings, one weight class up, because size makes a huge difference. And like, I could be wrong here. I mean, maybe I'm just really like undervaluing Lima's skills, but I think that Naimov is going to be way too strong for him, and I think that he knows that. Naimov, that is. I think Naimov's going to be the one implementing grappling here. And let's talk about his fight against Nathaniel Wood. Did he cheat in multiple occasions in that fight and not have a point deducted? Yes. Is he fighting in the Middle East again, where that could happen again? Yes. So I understand that, this is supposed to be a sport of honor and integrity, the martial arts, but, this is prize fighting and this is for money. And if you're not cheating, you're not trying. We see guys cheating all the time. John Jones literally finger poked every single person. I poked every single person that he fought on his legendary championship run, and is regarded as the dirtiest fighter of all time. So I'm not going to hold that against Naimov. I think that he will do what it takes to win. And I think that the biggest X factor here to me is his strength. And I think Nathaniel Wood is very good. And I know that that was a close fight and that Nathaniel Wood, had some very solid moments throughout the fight, like in the third, landing hellacious ground and pound toward the end. But Naimov dropped him in the first round, and he looked very, very dangerous. Like, he just looks like a menacing featherweight. And, like, I'm not sitting here saying that I think that Naimov, like, he's currently ranked the 22nd best featherweight fighter. I'm not saying that he's going to go on, this run and that he's the next Diego Lopez, but I think that Felipe could have I mean, this is a stretch, right? Because bantamweight is freaking loaded. But like, I'm not saying he's gonna do what BSD did in terms of like the replicating the exact success, but I'm just saying, like, I could see him dropping this fight and then having a lot of success at bantam. I just think that weight classes are there for a reason, and when it's especially daunting when you have a not big bantamweight versus a big featherweight. Like, I think that there's going to be a big disparity in these guys in cage weight, when they weigh them before they go in there and fight, and it's going to be an X factor here. So give me Muhammad Naimov to win by decision, because I think that Lima is tough. But I think that Naimov is going to get the victory. So moving on to the last fight of the prelims, we have Nasrat Haqparast versus Jared Gordon. Now, this is also an interesting fight. This is one of those tricky fights because, like, it's always hard to predict a fight where one of the fighters who is participating is like very inconsistent. And so Nasrat is he's grown up in the UFC. He makes his UFC debut in 2017, right? And he's 28, so he makes his UFC debut at 21, drops his UFC debut, and then goes on a really nice little win streak, gets knocked out by Drew Dober, nice win streak, and like he's beating guys who, like, at the time especially, it was impressive. Like when he beat Rafa Garcia, that was impressive. At one point, I mean, they didn't fight, but he had a canceled bout against Arman. Like the UFC clearly, and then his following two fights are losses to Dan Hooker and Bobby Green. But that's the thing, is that every time he's getting put in this step up in competition, it's kind of the narrative here, is that he's been losing. But I believe that this is the time that he comes in and he shines, because, Jared Gordon, for as well as he's done on his current run, which, I mean, if you count the Paddy Pimblett loss as a win, which me and every single other person in the world does, other than the 3 judges that were there that night, he is 6-1 in his last 7. But when I look at who he's beating, and I think about the matchup stylistically, I think that Nasrat has struggled in the losses that he has taken, because I think when a fighter excels at something and they fight somebody who is better than them at the area that they excel in, and they don't have a good backup plan, that's when they're going to struggle. And I mean, that's why they call it mixed martial arts. You got to have plan B, plan C. And, what we've seen of Nasrat is, like, his plan is boxing. I mean, he's a boxer by trade. And you're going to struggle with Drew Dober, Dan Hooker, and Bobby Green if you're pretty much relying on the hands. I mean, when these guys have been defeated, it's typically been somebody who's able to utilize that grappling, which Nasrat just doesn't have. But, again, honing in on this fight, I think that Jared Gordon's style is sort of like, I'm really hard to take down, I'm really gritty, and I'm going to make this like a dog fight, and I have good cardio, and I'm durable, but, like, I don't rate him as being very clean with the hands, and I don't really see him being able to implement offensive grappling on, he might be able to hold him up against the cage, but what we're learning now is that, like, it depends on if there's some favoritism going on. Like, I'll still say I think that Pantoja lost to Urseg, and that all of a sudden grappling and no damage counts then. But, like, where is that, in other fights? So what I'm saying is, like, I think the days of, like, Holly Holm holding someone against the cage for 21 minutes of a 25-minute fight and winning on clinch cage control time are done. And, Gordon might be able to accumulate some time holding Nasrat Haqparast up against the cage, but I think that when Nasrat has his moments, he's going to have too much volume, and I think that he's going to, boxing volume his way to a decision victory. I know that he knocked out Jamie Malarkey, but, join the club. Jamie Malarkey is one of these guys who's just, I don't know, he's got a chin, or lack thereof, actually. So Nasrat by decision. Moving on to the main card. There are some exciting fights on this main card, and I'm going to start off with the opener, Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezdemir. Man, this is tricky. Take everything I said about Nasrat and his inconsistent performances and, multiply it by 1,000. Johnny Walker, does he have the potential to be the light heavyweight GOAT with his athletic frame and being a physical specimen of a man? Dude, can we Volkov is 6'7" with an 80-inch reach. He's 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. He has all of the physical attributes to win, and yet he finds a way to get hilariously knocked out like something out of a Looney Tunes episode in most of his fights. So this is really tough. It's really tricky, because both of these guys, if you're going through their resume, their Tapology, it's like, one, it's shocking that they've gone this long without fighting, because both of these guys have been in the UFC for some time. Volkan's been in the UFC forever. Run it back. Actually, both of them got into the UFC around the same time, 2017. But run it back. At one point, 19-1, Volkan Oezdemir is challenging for a title against Daniel Cormier, where he ended up losing ground and pound. But anyway, so it's like you got two guys who've been in the UFC forever, who have come up short against the best that the UFC has to offer when they've had their opportunities to shine, and the two of them couldn't be more different in the way that they fight. Volkan, aka No Time, which the nickname suited him a lot better earlier in his career. Ironically, he got a first round win over Bogdan Guskov, and Bogdan's gone on, and so that win has aged very well. But ironically, before that, in the 3 fights in a row that went to decision, 2 of them that he lost, he did have time in those fights. And so when I say that the 2 of them couldn't be any more different, it's like Volkan is, a big guy still for light heavy. He's 6'2", he's got a 75-inch reach. And I guess the best way to describe his fighting style is that, and again, you have to understand that it's evolved over time, right? Before, he was just knocking all these guys out, and now he's had to, I think, develop a style that suits him better in this upper echelon, where it's like he's gotten finished in these big situations, like again against Daniel Cormier, against Yuri Prochazka, where he fights a little bit more conservatively. And I'm not going to go straight out there and say that he's point fighting, but he's not going to take the chances that he used to. He's fighting to win, is the best way that I can put it. He's fighting to win, whereas Johnny Walker, sometimes he fights to win, right? Like when he came out and he fought Anthony Smith, that might have been one of the best performances that we've ever seen. I think that is the best performance that we've seen. And I understand that there's a lot of haters, a lot of Anthony Smith haters. But if you take away all of the dumb shit that he says, he's a good fighter. And he just had a big time win, where he was a massive dog against Vitor Petrino. But I think that he fought a smart fight against Anthony, and yet it's like, but Anthony, he doesn't present any danger unless it's grappling anymore. That's the only way that Anthony Smith is able to present danger. If Johnny is presented, like, he still makes mistakes. Like, he made a big mistake in the Ankalaev fight, and it cost him a brutal KO loss. And so I think that, he's got these physical attributes, and I just can't rely on him to use them. Like, it's so tempting to take this guy, as it is every time. But I am going to be taking Volkan in this fight, because I just think that, like, Volkan is just a better fighter. Like, take physical attributes out of it, which I know I'm starting to sound like Anthony Smith now, but, like, I just think he's a better fighter, and I think that he's going to fight a better fight. And I could be wrong, and I could look dumb, and this is a tough one to pick, and that's why Vegas has it as a coin flip. But I trust. Look, I really liked what I saw out of him in that fight against Bogdan Guskov. And I'm so tempted to take Johnny Walker, but I'm going to stick with my guns here. Volkan Oezdemir will win. And I think that he wins by knockout. I think that Volkan gets like a second round knockout. Okay, so moving on, we have Shera Magomedov versus Antonio Tricali. I got Shera Magomedov to win this fight by knockout. There's a couple of things to point out, though, which are interesting. First of all, I mean, they've been doing everything they can to get Shara an opponent here. This is a really great showcase for him. He's like the Shara Magomedov lore at this point is honestly unreal. You got a guy fighting with one eye who can't fight in the U.S. because he can't get commissioned to fight in the U.S., so he gets permanent home field advantage. And, I think that a lot of the narrative around that first fight was, oh my gosh, like, he's got such a weakness in the takedown department. Look, despite the fact that Bruno Silva got 1-2 eye poke, finished, and his reputation is absolutely tarnished because Chris Weidman is allowed to do whatever he wants because they wanted him to win in his hometown. I think that Bruno Silva is a very good fighter. Let's not forget, he took Alex Pereira to a decision, which, the only other guy who's been able to do that is Polish power, Jan Blachowicz. And I just think that, of course Bruno was going to be shooting takedowns. Bro was getting kicked from every which way. He makes me think of that scene in Rush Hour where Chris Tucker's like, which one of you kicked me? Like, he doesn't even know, who because the kicks were so fast. Shara might be the best kicker I've ever seen. I know that this is a lot to say going off of his UFC debut. His kicking is unreal. And they tried to, match him up with Ihor, but then Ihor had that other fight that he took on short notice. And so it's I don't know, it made sense that one fell off. And then you got Joelton Luderbach, who's just yeah, guys, sorry, I took roids. I didn't realize that was going to be a problem. I took juice. And just openly admits it. It's hilarious. And now you've got Antonio Tricali, a light heavyweight who made 185.5, who's 6'5" with an 82-inch reach. I'm going to repeat that. He's a middleweight who's 6'5" with an 82-inch reach. That's more impressive than Johnny Walker's physique. But the problem is, to me, is that, he's lost to guys on the regional scene who you shouldn't be losing to if you're this talented. And that was at light heavyweight, I understand. But you also have to wonder, man, dude, how sucked down is this guy going to be? Is there a world where he just puts his wrestling shoes on and he just puts on like an absolute wrestling clinic against Shara? Yeah, I guess. But I think that is a very unlikely outcome. I think that Shara is going to catch him coming in on a takedown. And also, if Shara struggled with the grappling against, in his matchup that he had against Bruno Silva, he's going to work on it. That fight was in October. He's had a long time. And coming off of a fight like that, where all of a sudden now you have a big lore and you have a big interest. Every fight is going to be a big deal now. And the man said it. He said it himself. He's a pirate. He sails the seven seas. He's gonna win this fight, and he's gonna probably catch him with a knee coming in, and it's gonna be a brutal KO. So that's my pick for that one. So moving on in the fight, getting up there, we got Kelvin Gastelum versus Daniel Rodriguez. I don't know what the hell's going on here in this fight, if I'm being honest. Kelvin Gastelum is Paulo Costa maxing, for lack of better terms. Bro just really came out this week on media day, not even giving D-Rod a heads up weeks ago, comes in on media day and is like, yo, I'm having a bad camp. Let's not do welter. But you know what? I can't even make catch weight of 180. Let's just do the fight at 185. And poor D-Rod, the two of these guys pretty much have both said in interviews that this is a loser leaves town, potentially, type of a matchup. Which might be a little harsh, but could be true. I mean, D-Rod's coming off 2 stoppage losses, albeit to Neil Magny and Ian Gary, who I think are good. Those aren't awful losses. And then, Kelvin Gastelum is that sketchy win over Chris Curtis. And then he wins this fight versus, he loses his fight and gets absolutely dominated and submitted against, I clicked on the wrong fighter here. Sean Brady. Always blanking on these when I'm trying to think while I'm talking here. And it's it was already going to be hard to pick a Kelvin Gastelum fight. It was already going to be hard to do this. And now and now he's Chad maxing, and it's did he get hurt in camp? Bro, I don't even know. I don't know how to take any of this. And I'm sure that, that the UFC brass are just fed up with this guy because he is on Alex Perez levels of canceled bouts. And he's had so many canceled bouts. And then he just shows up this week and it's in that other fight, they were the main event. It's bro, you're not even the main event. So, you have to refer to it as Kelvin Gasteluming now when you just show up and just demand that we fight at a weight class higher, not even a catch weight. And just the only explanation is just because making weights for, I don't know, for jabronis. I don't understand this. I'm having a really tough time with this pick now because, going in, I would have thought to myself, I like to take Gastelum here because D-Rod is just is he just fighting for money now? He's 37, But there's a lot of boxes that go D-Rod's way. I think that, at welter, he would be bigger, but it's he's not now because he is a welterweight and now he's fighting a middleweight. It just fucks everything up, honestly, when you're trying to figure this out now. But I'm just going to go with my original take and just hope that Kelvin Gastelum isn't injured. I think Kelvin wins this fight. I think that D-Rod is, when you see somebody come into their media day and they say, I'm turning things around, this is the best camp that I've ever had, I'm going to get back to my winning ways, it's a hard sell for me when they're 37. It just is. And I know that Kelvin feels like he's 37, but he's 32. And gosh, I don't know, dude. I mean, I'm going to go Kelvin Gastelum by decision, but he's insane. And this whole thing is insane. And I do feel bad for D-Rod. Maybe if D-Rod loses, he won't get cut because of this. Maybe D-Rod, the old, D-Rod is going to come out because he's getting disrespected like this. Probably not. Kelvin by decision. Moving on to the co-main event. Sergei Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. I mean, this is nuts. This is the craziest heavyweight fight. I understand that these guys were boys and they had their little gentleman's agreement that they wouldn't fight unless it was for a title. But I almost think that, that makes the fight more interesting because from Sergei's account, he wasn't going to take the fight, but then he got back a contract that was signed by Volkov. And for him, can you imagine, your boy who you grew up with and trained with, and you had this gentleman's agreement, and you see that, you're like, I wouldn't sign, and you see that they signed, and it's almost like a sign of betrayal. And I don't speak a lick of Russian, but it felt like at the ceremonial weigh-ins that, they were speaking to each other in Russian. And it felt as though, although it seemed playful and you always see Sergei laughing, it felt serious. And can we just talk about Sergei's physique? I mean, bro looks huge. He tipped the scale at 260. Bro looks massive. He weighed in at more than Volkov. Bro looks thick. And, I understand coming off of that Aspinall loss, you might think, oh no, the aura's gone now. You have to remember that was a short notice fight, and until he got clipped, he looked good in that fight. And the thing about fighting Tom Aspinall is that Tom is allergic to decisions. Mans just says, one of us is going down, and I'm gonna activate my trap card, phone booth fight, and we're gonna fight in a phone booth until one of us goes into the shadow realm. And that's the only way that Tom Aspinall fights go. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But let's talk about what happened the last time that he got stopped in the first round with ground and pound strikes by Uberin. He goes on a 6 fight streak of first round finishes. Now, I know that Alexander Volkov is coming off of some wins, right? But it's when we go through and we look at the wins, Rosenstruik, I think, was an early stoppage. Maybe he would have won the fight either way, but I don't know. I would have liked to see that fight play out because we've seen Biggie Boy, do his thing, and I kind of wish we got to see more of that one. He beats Romanov. I think the Romanov aura is completely gone now. At one point, bro was showing up to his fights looking like, King Kong, and now he shows up looking like, he's got a beer belly, and I don't get it. And I don't know what happened to him. I really don't. But I don't rate that fight very well. And then it's the fall off of Tai Tuivasa needs to be studied. At one point people thought maybe his magic was the shoey, but I don't know, man. I mean, Tuivasa has had a horrible run, 4 losses in a row, and dude, getting Ezekiel choked in MMA, Like, getting Ezekiel choked, first of all, just in no-gi, to me, is insane. Because, like, an Ezekiel choke functionally is a good submission because of the fact that you're able to grab your collar. Like, you're able to get your grip, and then you're able to bring your hand around. And so I can't rate that win as, as super impressive. And I think that I was going back and I was watching some of Volkov's fights. And because he's so tall and he's got such a height advantage on his opponents, that he has a very open, he's got a very open guard. I mean, he's going to get hit with straight shots going through that guard. And if he does this sort of long, block, he's going to have shots come over the guard. And I just think that bro is not going to be used to fighting a guy that has a reach advantage against him. I don't think that he's ever fought anyone who has a reach advantage against him. It would take a while to go through and confirm that, but there's not a lot of guys that are pushing more than an 80-inch reach. Even in heavyweight. There's really not. I mean, Tom Aspinall, he's got a 78-inch reach. I think that Pavlovich is going to knock him out in the first round. And I know that this isn't a controversial pick. And honestly, towards the beginning, I was starting to think, man, maybe this is Volkov's time. But when I go back and I watch, the fights, and I see Volkov's openings, due to his style being so built around his frame, and then you see Sergei coming in weighing more than you've ever seen him weigh before. And it's dude, Sergei is a tank, and I think that we're going to see a vintage first round Sergei Pavlovich knockout. And I very much am looking forward to it. Moving on to the main event, we have Robert Whittaker, the Reaper, Bobby Knuckles versus Ikram Aliskerov. So, everybody knows, right? This is not everybody's aware that this was supposed to be Hamzat. And, I don't know what's up with Hamzat, man. He's I don't know, just illness prone now. It sucks. It sucks. I've seen a lot of people shitting on him, but it sucks. He was the most exciting fighter. His splash might have outdid Connor's. In hindsight, it won't, because he never, he hasn't gotten the belts. But the splash that he made was insane. I kill everybody. And he's fucking fighting in back-to-back weeks, and what he did to pour to the leech, dude, that was sad, man. He literally picks Xingliang up and walks him over to Dana White like an animal when they go and hunt something and they're showing it off and they bring it back to their owner. Portrayed Dana White as a slave owner, kind of is. Anyway, and so we got Ikram, and I'm seeing people's opinions, right? I'm seeing the opinions of the fellow fighters and the MMA personalities who are all saying that this is just way too big of a step up in competition, and that Robert Whittaker, as Israel Adesanya said, is going to beat the brakes off of him, and this, that, and the other, about how, this fight is such a mismatch. Let me tell you a few things about Ikram Aliskerov that you may or may not have known. Okay, so first of all, Ikram Aliskerov, his only loss, and people he's smoked guys on the regional scene, and then he smoked guys who he's supposed to beat in the UFC. And so everybody hones in on that Chimaev fight, and they think that is the tale Ikram Aliskerov. That, he's just the guy who got chinned by Chimaev. And listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. In my last video, I literally said, I go, you get a Bobby Knuckles fight for getting chinned by Chimaev. I've done some digging on him this week, and there's some important things that you need to know going into that fight. First of all, that fight was it was at a catch weight of 175 pounds, which is a lot of weight for our guy Aliskerov to cut. I mean, he cuts from 220 to 185. So he was cutting an insane amount of weight to get down there. And that fight was on short notice, too. Crazy to think that Brave got graced with a Chimaev versus Aliskerov fight when both of them were, pretty... But you also have to understand that he was 26 in that fight. And, guys, fighters get better. They get much better. And another thing that you need to understand is that he was a Sambo world champion on the same team. On the same exact team as Islam Makhachev. God, yeah, I can't believe I was just blanking on his name. Same team as Islam Makhachev, and he trained at the same academy that Abdul Manap Nurmagomedov started in Dagestan, Russia. And I know that when you're picking this guy, which, spoiler alert, I am. I'm picking Ikram Aliskerov by knockout. When you're picking this guy, you're relying on potential here. And I see a lot of guys I've seen guys like James Lynch talking about how can you pick Ikram, who has he fought? And it's like, look, if fighters only won fights based on the guys that they have fought, if that logic predetermined fight outcomes, we would literally see guys stay at the top of the division their whole career and nobody ever ascend a division. Right? So, and I'm not trying to dog these guys because I like James Lynch, but as much as these guys are trying to, act like they're MMA experts, I think that they're typically too afraid to actually dig in on these fights and make a pick based on not just who they fought, but the skill level, the accolades, the timing of their careers. And look, guys, I'm not saying that this is a lock by any means. I mean, he's going up against the Reaper, okay? And Robert Whittaker has defeated a lot of very high... I mean, he's the number one contender gatekeeper, which is insane. We've never really seen anything like it before, I guess, other than Marab, but Aljo's gone now. And I guess, I know Izzy has his title fight, but I guess in a way, the door is there. But, he also lost to Drakus, so it's again, number one contender gatekeeper. But I think that his biggest strength is also his biggest weakness. When he makes these karate blitzes, if you're able to time those blitzes, you can land a very powerful jab. And Aliskerov, I think that's his best weapon. It's his 1-2 down the pipe, I think is his best weapon. I mean, he's got knees, he's got kicks. Let's not even talk about his grappling, which we haven't even seen in the UFC, even though he's literally at the same caliber grappler as Islam Makhachev, and the guys fighting out of... I'm not just saying this because he's out of Dagestan. He literally fought on that Sambo team. We've seen what guys who fought on that Sambo team have gone on to do. He is training with world-class grapplers and strikers. So I don't think that this is too big of a step up. I think that he was going to start running into the same problem. Islam Makhachev, Umar Nurmagomedov syndrome, where nobody wants to fight this guy. You're looking at Ikram's, other than one bout where he got injured and pulled out against Anthony Hernandez, I mean, Imavov, he pulls out. Muniz, he pulls out. Like, you're seeing guys sign the dotted line and then change their mind in a confusing number of times that you're seeing this happen. So I know that this isn't the craziest take ever, right? But obviously, if the fight goes long, I could see that favoring Robert Whittaker. But I do think that it depends, because I think that if there's one thing that I've learned watching Whittaker fights recently, it's that he's not wearing damage well. I mean, he won that fight against Paulo Costa. And let me talk about that one real quick, right? He wins the fight against Paulo Costa, and then Paulo Costa goes on to get absolutely manhandled and dominated from start to finish against Sean Strickland. I literally can't believe that was a split decision, but that makes no sense at all. That guy should be hung. But anyway, people have the audacity to say, where's the Paulo Costa who showed up to fight Robert Whittaker? It's like, newsflash, dipshit, it's the same guy. It's his opponent is changing the way that he looks. I think Strickland would probably smoke Robert Whittaker. I think that Whittaker's, karate blitz style, it wouldn't work with that Philly shell defense. I think that what we're seeing in the middleweight division is like an evolution of this next generation of guys like DDP and like Sean Strickland, who are emerging and showing. And I hate to say it, man, but like Imavov, I know that it was kind of a sketchy win that he had against Cannonier, but like he was turning the tide and he was looking good. We're seeing this new generation of middleweight contenders, and like they're handily beating the old generation. I think that Whittaker prefers a fight that's more like a spar. He prefers a fight that's going to be like his rematch against Adesanya, where they're just kind of going tit for tat. I know he got dropped in that fight, but that even speaks more so to what I'm saying. Like, I think that Robert, his chin is a little bit suspect. And I think that he has this aura where when he's fighting guys like Cannonier, like Till, like Gastelum, like he scares them out of wanting to fight him because they're scared of what could happen to them. But he hasn't knocked someone out since 2017. I think that Ikram's going to knock him out in the second round. I think that the fight's going to start, and Robert's going to look good for the first few minutes, and then one of these times that he blitz in, Ikram is going to crack him with a power jab. Crack him. And then I think you're going to see Ikram, when he's hurt, start to utilize the wrestling a little bit. And I don't think that the wrestling is going to be like an absolute X factor, but I think that Ikram is going to be so confident in his ability to grapple that when he's on top, he's going to let some shots go, or he's going to maybe be hunting for a Kimura. I think he's going to wear on him, and I think that Rob's just going to melt under the pressure, and he's going to finish him in the second round. The odds makers have this fight at about a pick'em, and people think that's crazy, and I don't. And I'm not saying that Ikram's going to run away with it. I can see a world where Robert Whittaker just out-veterans him, and that the moment is too big for Ikram. But that is my prediction for the fight. These Dagestani guys, especially ones who, I have seen brilliance from, have typically shined in moments where it really counted. And so I think Ikram will here as well. Anyway, if you guys, like any of my takes, or maybe you think you have some insight on some fights, you disagree, let me know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe. Be on the lookout for my 5 best bets video that I'm going to be posting tomorrow. And yeah, I hope we get to see some bangers in the desert. So take it easy, guys. Until next time.